right. So hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of our faculty office hours featuring some stars from the Reed faculty here, who I will soon turn it over to. But before we do that, my name is Shalini Upu. I am Director of Admission here at Reed College. And first and foremost, I just want to thank you all for joining us for the next 40 or 50 or so minutes. Of course, in ordinary circumstances, we'd love for you to come and visit campus and get to see us in person, but it means a lot to us that we can connect with you virtually here and tell you a little bit more about Russian, comparative literature, film and media studies, and get to know you a little bit better too. So a couple of requests. If you have any questions at any point during the next 40, 50 minutes or so, go ahead and directly chat them to me. Again, my name is Shalini. You can see me in the list there in the drop down. And then I will make sure that they get to the appropriate person to be answered. If you have a question later on, if you think of something brilliant 2 minutes after we conclude, that's totally okay. You can always reach out to anybody on our team and we'll make sure that we get that answered for you. I see that some of you have joined us at previous sessions, so we're excited to welcome you back. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to the professors is are there any admitted students in here? Awesome. All right, well, welcome to everyone, but a very special congratulations to our admitted students. Again, so happy that you can join us, and sit back, relax, and enjoy. Take it away, professors.
Hey guys, my name is Burstein. I'm a professor in the Russian department, and welcome to our faculty office hours.
Hi, I'm Naomi Kaffee. I'm a relatively new professor in the Russian department, and welcome as well. Both Zhenya and I also teach courses that count towards comparative literature major, and Zhenya, you also teach classes that count for the new film studies minor, right?
So today we're gonna tell you about our departments, talk about our research, and just answer your questions about Reed, about how things work here, and about what is special about Reed. And normally we would have this meeting on campus, and I would see all your faces, and I would chat and meet your parents possibly. And our department, the Russian department, usually holds these meetings every year. I've been at Reed for 20 years. Usually we hold these meetings in the Russian house, which is like a little dacha, like a little house where 7, 8 students live and speak Russian. So it's kind of a dorm, but also a cultural center where they hold events like movie screenings, conversation hours, and various kinds of parties devoted to Russian and Russian culture. But today it's happening differently. We very much hope that soon things are going to be back to normal, and it's important for us to actually interact with people in the flesh. So that's what we are hoping to experience soon. But my remarks are going to be slightly unusual too. I would like to start with reading or letting you read. I'm going to do the screen share and let you read a letter that I received, an email I received from a former student of mine yesterday. And I asked for permission. I was kind of sort of a moving letter, and I asked for permission to share it with you. But it was not solicited in any way. letter. So let me read it. It's called Pesach Greetings. Dear Zhenya, happy Pesach. I hope this message finds you well. All indications from social media indeed. All indications from social media tell me that you're alive, reading the news and buying groceries. I have been mainly at home since I returned from a work trip to Rwanda on March 12th. It seems like I came back just in time. My husband is also working from home for his job at the World Bank. For perhaps the first time, I'm extremely pleased that we bought this oversized house with the yard in the suburbs. we live in strange times. A few days ago, I mailed my mother 2 tablespoons of yeast because she could not find any in a 10 store she phoned to ask. My father, a 75-year-old radiologist, is working from home in Chicago reading x-rays and ultrasound images for the University of Illinois. I'm relieved that he no longer goes into the hospital where they are treating COVID-19 patients. I have started rereading Evgeny Onegin, Eugene Onegin, the novel in verse, kind of Pushkin's, kind of one of the great masterpieces of Russian literature, with Tina Schneider, who's another former student of ours, and 4 other women. We convene once a week on Zoom and discuss the readings together. I'm impressed with the level of Russian of my Pushkin book club. We're proceeding at a glacial pace of 10 stanzas per week. But for working people, this seems realistic. I still have the excellent version we read 15 years ago with an introduction by A.D.P. Briggs and vocabulary from Francis Sabatka. Reading Onegin for me now is comforting and familiar. I still remember when I showed up in your office the winter of my last semester retreat with the intention of dropping the class. The add-drop form in my backpack was already filled out, but you talked me into staying in your course. I'm glad that I did. Thank you for teaching me Pushkin. My 15th read reunion is canceled this June, and I'm not sure when I will see you again. But when I do, I will tell you what I learned reading Onegin at age 38 compared with age 23. Form wishes Margaret. So it's one of their many former students of ours writing just to check in. And I thought it was very moving, but also kind of reflects the spirit and the ideal and aspiration for what we're doing here. So Margaret works in international development. She was a Russian political science major here. It was ad hoc major, kind of special major. You can bring 2 subjects together. She won Fulbright fellowship after Reed and spent a year in St. Petersburg. Then she went to graduate school, business school, University of Chicago, and she's been working on international developments ever since. She's absolutely fluent in Russian, and that helped her in her career. And her career is kind of an idealistic one, right? She's not working to. I mean, it's a good career, but the kind of the overall agenda of this career is idealistic, and what she learned here in terms of her Russian language and Russian culture and Russian literature certainly helped her in her professional career, in her professional path. But what is somewhat more important or equally important for us is that the works of Russian literature, specifically in this case, she discusses Pushkin's Eugene Onegin, which is indeed one of the greatest works of Russian literature and difficult, not quite translatable, to kind of serves for her and, as we see, other students as some kind of, I don't know,
touchstone. Yeah.
Touchstone, yeah. As something that supports them and feeds them and stimulates them and brings them together. And I'm just really very moved and satisfied with this particular result of our work, because of course we want our students to learn the foreign languages or the film studies or comparative literature and to have excellent professional futures, not necessarily in those fields. You know, when you teach Eugene Pushkin or Tolstoy or Dostoevsky to students, you don't necessarily think that they're going to become a Dostoevsky scholar, or they're going to go to a business school, or they're going to become medical doctors or rabbis. Like, all of that happens. But we want them to, on the one hand, you know, receive skills and knowledge. On the other hand, kind of build their lives in the ways that make them fulfilled and happy and satisfied. And when they write to us that we somehow contributed to that, it feels very good. That was my remark.
Oh my gosh.
My remarks. I know that it was more lyrical than information. Please feel free to ask any kinds of informational questions. We'll be very happy to answer them too. Naomi.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have nothing nearly as beautiful or poetic or inspiring to say, but I will say that I agree with Zhenya. First of all, for completely practical reasons, choosing to study a foreign language like Russian can be really helpful in setting you on a career path. And that's not necessarily just because you can use a foreign language on the job or that it makes you a more attractive applicant, no matter what job you apply for, but it also gives you a kind of unique skill set that helps you in a lot of ways you might not immediately think about. It helps to be able to put yourself in another person's shoes or in the shoes of somebody from another culture. It helps you to think about the ways in which your own, what kinds of assumptions that you bring to the world based on your own language and your own culture. And it helps you to, it's useful to be able to think beyond those things. And that's the kind of skill that can help you out no matter what your career path is. So I would say that's also a big advantage of studying a foreign language. And I would also say that we have an incredibly diverse set of course offerings here in the Russian department. We offer Russian language at all levels. We also have courses on a lot of different topics, not just canonical Russian literature. So we have kind of a core sequence of courses that will introduce you to the main developments and writers in the Russian canon. But we also, for example, I teach a class called Multicultural Russia, where we look at writers and filmmakers and artists from Central Asia, the Caucasus, the Arctic. I also have a class called Nuclear Literature, where we look at the theme of nuclear war and disaster from a number of different traditions. And we also have film studies classes and classes about Russian poetry. So I think that's another big advantage to our department and our approach to Russian culture. And I'm also really happy to answer any questions you have about the work that we do here in the department.
Great, great. Thank you both. Thank you for that wonderful foundation to get us started. I'm wondering if either or both of you can speak a little bit to how do majors build community among each other and kind of with each other in your departments?
Naomi, would you?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Well, I would say the Russian House, as Zhenya already mentioned, is the kind of center of our community of Russian speakers at Reed. Once you come to visit the campus, you'll see that there's this little area on campus that has several different language houses all clustered together, including the Russian House. And so students, usually sophomores and juniors, Russian majors or people who are just interested in Russian culture, apply to live in the Russian House. It works like a dorm. And we have all kinds of cultural events there connected to the curriculum. So as students go to Russian House, to film screenings as part of film courses that they're enrolled in. In my beginning Russian language class, students go to the Russian House in order to do cultural activities as part of their coursework. We also have what's called a Russian language scholar. This is a native speaker of Russian. It's someone who has usually just finished their undergrad or has finished maybe some master's level coursework, who comes to the college for 1 year to live in the Russian House and be kind of the cultural attaché. We've done cooking demonstrations. Zhenya is an expert at one Russian dish called grechka. So not too long ago, we all gathered at the Russian House. It seems like a million years ago, but I think it was just a few months ago. And we learned how to make this Russian dish. We've had sing-along nights. We have a poetry evening at the end of each semester. So I would say that community is not just peripheral to what we do, but it's baked into the coursework. And so kind of engaging in this community is part of what you do as you go through the coursework for a Russian major.
And obviously, some departments at Reed are smaller than others, smaller in terms like more intimate than others. The foreign language departments, they usually have really kind of tight communities that bring together students and faculty and language scholar around them, just because it's sort of, we have, 10, 15, sometimes fewer students in our classes. We have maybe 3, 4 students graduating as Russian majors every year. They go abroad where we visit with them. So our relations with our relationships with our students are quite close, sort of during when they study at Reed, and actually, as you can see afterwards as well. It happens naturally, partly because of our smallness in a way, because it's kind of there is kind of natural intimacy that comes with a group. When a group of people, just a couple dozen people, are immersed in doing something that deeply interests them, and that applies to faculty and students and language scholars and the friends of the department. It's important to remember that in our classes, there are lots of students who are not learning Russian, who are learning film or learning, they may just taking classes right now I'm teaching a course, Sergei Eisenstein, kind of the giant of film history, and there are very few students in my class who major in Russian, or for whom Russian is a major subject. Like for many of them, that's the first class they take that's connected to Russian culture at all. So they're going to be some media studies major, maybe physics majors, poli-sci majors. They just cover this topic because it's important and it interests them. So it's not like department is focused exclusively on teaching its majors. We have a lot of students from all walks of life who come to us.
Yeah, and Zhenya, you brought up ad hoc majors before, and I can just add that even in my short time at Reed, I've made the acquaintance of students who are doing really interesting topics for their ad hoc major and who are writing really interesting interdisciplinary theses that combine either Russian and poli-sci or Russian and anthropology. So Russian is also a really good topic to combine with other disciplines. It lends itself to a lot of really cool interdisciplinary topics.
Just a few facts about the department. There are currently 4 faculty members, but normally there are 3 faculty members in the department. Our 2 colleagues who are not here right now is Marat Greenberg, whose specialty is Russian Jewish studies and kind of Judaica in general, but specifically subfield Russian Jewish literature and film, and he is a fairly distinguished scholar in that field. And our senior colleague, Lena Lenchik, is, apart from being a scholar of Russian literature, she is also a well-known author. One of her books is a cultural history of beach, which was sort of well-known. There were like television shows made about it, and it was on the cover of like New York Times book review and this kind of thing. And she's a very interesting and brilliant person. I'm a scholar of Russian modernism, and specifically I'm working on a project on Sergei Eisenstein right now, and I'm teaching a course on Eisenstein, just coincidence in a way. And I also work on history of sexuality and on symbolism and decadence as the movements in early 20th century Russian culture. Naomi, do you want to say a few words about your field of research?
Yeah, sure. So I specialize in minority and transnational literature written in the Russian language. So I'm interested in literature written by indigenous peoples of Siberia and the Russian far north. I'm interested in literature written in Russian from the former Soviet republics of Central Asia and the Caucasus. So right now I'm preparing, kind of in the process of writing a book about that phenomenon, the phenomenon of non-Russian people writing in the Russian language. I'm also, just recently, I've gotten very interested in political cartoons and visual culture of the Caucasus. So together with some colleagues in Tbilisi, Georgia, I'm doing a digital humanities project. It's a digital archive of political cartoons from the Caucasus in the early 20th century. I'm interested in this relationship between power and identity and the way that these issues are discussed in satirical journals at this time. So I try to incorporate this to the extent that I can in my classes on multicultural Russia and 19th century Russia.
Maybe it's time for you to ask questions and for us to answer them. Let's make it more interactive.
So we do have a couple of great questions coming in from both Junho and Madeline are wondering if, Zhenya, I think if you can talk a little bit more about the film and media studies minor, sort of how much of it is theory, how much of it is practice, and just in general, what does that curriculum look like right now?
That's a good question. So it's a new program, just approved just this year, I believe, and there is. We've always had, it's interdisciplinary program. It means that we don't have a department for film and media studies. We may have it one day, maybe it may happen fairly soon, but not now. But we have a lot of film and media scholars in various programs. So they kind of bring together the courses, the research to build this program. And you take, basically, it's not a major, so you can say you can major in physics or in philosophy or political science or in Russian, and have a minor in film. You need to take a certain number of courses in film history and theory. I'm not sure there's much practice going on at all. I think that there are some courses in film practice, but it's certainly not a film practice oriented program. It is theory and history oriented program.
Great, thank you. So again, feel free to directly chat your questions to me if you have any specific ones. I'm curious though, I'm wondering, one of the things I'm wondering about for both of you or either of you is how you both work directly with students. Kind of how have you incorporated students into, say, your publications, maybe a book you're working on, your research, maybe thesis advising, really any or all of the above?
Naomi, go ahead.
One thing that I'm doing right now is working with a student of mine who took my beginning Russian class. This student is just now declaring an ad hoc major in anthropology and Russian. And she was interested in the topic of race in the Soviet Union. And she wanted to do a comparative analysis of how race was understood in the Soviet Union and what role the United States and the politics of racism in the United States in the 20th century had an effect on that. And so she wrote a research paper, and she's now revising it to give a presentation about this at an undergraduate conference at UCLA, which is going to be held virtually at the beginning of May. And this was kind of, so this is the kind of thing that I really encourage students to do. And I think in the past, both Zhenya and I and the other professors in the Russian department haven't been involved in projects like this. So if a student has a research topic they want to dig deep into, we find ways to help them to pursue that. I know literary translations have been collaborative projects that we've undertaken in the past. Maybe Zhenya, do you want to talk a little bit about the recent translation projects you've done?
Absolutely, yeah. If there is one thing we do really well at READ is the student-faculty collaborations, and the opportunities for those research collaborations are ample. So the most obvious thing in which is not exactly collaboration, that's your own independent research scholarly project that you do at the end of your course of study at READ, is your senior thesis, which is a year-long project that kind of results in a dissertation, basically. We call it senior thesis, but you know, it's a kind of small dissertation. And you work on it you're closely advised, closely supervised, but advised by a professor with whom you are working on this project. I mean, it is your project, but you get kind of the undivided attention of someone who is guiding you through the process, both kind of from point of view of like literal guiding, kind of structuring your work, and from the point of view of your scholarship. And that's what every student at READ does in his or her their field. The thing that's specific for it is the opportunity to work on collaborative projects, which oftentimes take place in the summer. They're funded through special endowed sources. And so in that case, both the student and professor are actually paid to work on a project. And they have to result in something that is of a publishable quality. I've done it many, many times. I want to show you something. This is a book which my student, it's a commented translation of a Russian book. It's a war memoir by a famous Russian scholar, Yuri Lotman. And if you see, it says, so translated and annotated by, sorry, there's like, yeah, disregard the dedication here, but it's translated and annotated by Carolyn Brickman, edited by Jenny Burstein, and afterward by Brickman Burstein. That is a result of, and not every summer project ends in a published book, right? And of course, it took longer than one summer, but that is the result of kind of a thesis and a summer of working on this together, turn it into a book, generously funded by those special kind of fellowship that READ offers for this kind of project. I've done it many times with many of my students, those who were kind of aspiring professional scholars. Almost all of them went on to earn PhDs in either in Slavic field, Russian history, something. And this is the experience that really very significant, because it allows you to build very close intellectual and personal relationship with your student. I really enjoy that. And this is a READ thing in many ways, right? Because again, the fabulous large universities in this country, but you oftentimes can go through the entire course of study without like talking to a professor. You will attend the lectures, and and then your work is going to be graded by graduate students. Here, the level of intellectual closeness that you experience with the faculty is very different.
Yeah, and I guess there's also another student who's involved in a translation project this year. she was interested in the Russian poet Anna Akhmatova. And so on her own volition, she applied for some funding that's available for students to conduct projects over winter break. And she won this fellowship from the college to travel to St. Petersburg, Russia, to retrace the footsteps of this poet whose work she was interested in translating. So there's also a lot of funding opportunities just within the college that Reed students can apply to in order to pursue their projects, and faculty can also assist students with getting external funding. So we're also quite familiar with the logistics of how to make these kinds of projects happen. And I would say that that's another thing that is kind of unique to the Reed experience.
That's great. That's great. Thank you both. We're getting a question from Quinn asking, what would a Russian minor look like? And what level of experience would you need in the language just to begin taking Russian classes at Reed?
0 level of experience is required to begin taking Russian at Reed. Like, we assume, of course, there are some students who have studied Russian before, but most of them, like 9 out of 10, have not studied Russian before. Russian is not taught much in high schools in this country, so you learn Russian here, and you learn it well. The minor requires, look it up on our website, but basically minor, I think we expect at least that you learn at least 2 years of Russian, and then take a couple of literature courses in the original. At least one in the original. That's the so overall it's like 6 courses. Like whatever you major in, again, maybe computer science or physics or dance, you will have room in your schedule to do a minor in Russian or French or film studies, right?
Mm-hmm. And I could also add that many students start out with no knowledge of Russian, so they enroll from the beginning as first years in beginning Russian. But for those students who come to Reed already knowing some Russian, we have a placement test that we give to students in order to determine where they'll begin taking their Russian classes at Reed. So it's possible to minor in Russian even if you already know some Russian, maybe from high school, or maybe you speak it in your family. You can test into a higher level, and we still provide a pathway for you to do the Russian minor that way. So no matter where you start, we meet you where you're at, and we just go from there. Most people start with no knowledge, and we just go up from there.
If you already have a lot of Russian, then you may be taking more literature courses in the original Russian, and fewer language courses.
Right, and the placement test can kind of help folks.
Yeah, when you come to Reed, like in the beginning of during the orientation week, you are invited to take a number of placement tests for the subject, like in math, I think, and in foreign languages and something else. And they're not to evaluate you, right? They're just to find the proper level in which you want to start. You're not given any grades for that, just so that the class that you take matches your needs. Mm-hmm. But you don't need to take it if you've never learned Russian, right? Then you just automatically take, first years.
Naomi, you mentioned that student who won a grant to go to St. Petersburg. And I'm wondering if you can talk about, and maybe some students would be interested in study abroad opportunities offered through any of the departments here?
Most of our students, it's easier for me to speak about the Russian department because I know how it works. So most of our students take either a semester or a summer and a semester, sometimes a year. All of that is possible, and we have a variety of study abroad programs in Russia and the former Soviet Union. and we're developing new ones as we speak. But most of them go to Smolny College in St. Petersburg, which is a Bard Smolny Bard College, it's a peer institution. They not only study, St. Petersburg is a fabulous city, and they not only, they really enjoy it, like going there, and they not only study the language intensively, but they also take courses in a variety of subjects. Some in English, some in Russian, but next to their Russian peers. So that's what the particularly value about this program is, that it's not a language program per se, it's a full immersion liberal arts and sciences education that they take in Russian liberal arts and sciences college in the format which we practice here at Reed, in the conference format. Yeah, next to their Russian peers. And that is an important part of the experience. So, although, of course, there are some students who don't do that, and that's fine too, because they find other ways of kind of familiarizing themselves with the culture.
Mm-hmm. One program that's based in the US that many of our students take advantage of is the Middlebury Summer Language Schools. So this is a program at the Liberal Arts College in Middlebury, Vermont. They have several different languages where they run immersion programs on this campus. And often what our students will do is enroll in a summer course in the Russian language at Middlebury, and then follow that with a semester in St. Petersburg at Smolny. Sometimes students also, as Zhenya said, combine a summer and fall semester or spring and summer semester. But there's a lot of different opportunities in the US too for students who prefer to go that route.
Great. So I'll I'll take some moderator privilege here and ask you both. You've been at Reed for different amounts of time. What would you say you enjoy the most about teaching at Reed?
Students.
Students. Easy question. Yeah, I would say
you get remarkably bright and intellectually intense and dedicated students here.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've had visitors, like, you know, we have a lot of people coming from all over the world in the United States, kind of famous leading scholarly institutions. They come give talks, they come to our classes to teach a class. And over and over and over, again and again, they tell us that that was like the best class I've taught. Like, they come from Yale and said, that was like the best class I've taught in my life. Like, in terms of the student participate, like intensity and level of preparation, but also kind of the level of engagement that the students show in the class. So that's why we're here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say that it's not only that the students are excellent and very engaged, but it's also that students have such a unique perspective oftentimes. I'm amazed by the creativity of my students. I'm amazed by my students' sense of humor. Sometimes in a Russian class, we just, are doubled over laughing by, some very astute comment that somebody has made, or some observation that somebody has about the readings that I never would have thought of. So I would say that my students often get me to see this, these works of Russian literature that I've maybe read 100 times in a different way than I ever would have. And so I'm always just amazed by the new perspectives that I get from working with them. And that's the real reward to me.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about how you give students feedback in a language class? You know, it takes maybe a different shape from how you might give feedback in a lecture style or literature class, but how are those different?
Naomi.
Okay, so first of all, we start conversing from day one in beginning Russian. So we have a communication-based class. We try to simulate as much as possible real-life communicative situations. We work with authentic materials, and by that I mean restaurant menus, film clips, tourist brochures, videos, comics that are in the target language and designed for speakers of the target language. And we also work on different types of skills, so different ways that a person engages with the language. We do reading skills, listening skills, writing skills, speaking skills, and the way that students progress in all of those skill sets is assessed is in different ways. So students do written quizzes, but they also do presentations. We do creative writing assignments. We did magnet poetry in beginning Russian, which was just amazing. So people with maybe 2 months of Russian under their belt were already creating these amazing and hilarious poems in Russian. So I try to have as much of a diversity of feedback as possible and as much of a diversity of assignments and methods of instruction as possible, because that's the language itself, using a language, is diverse in exactly those ways. So we try to replicate that in the classroom.
Well said.
And Zhenya, in your second-year Russian class, students are already reading poetry and translating their own poetry.
By the end of the second year. And so the important thing, it's a small class, right? That's what you come to read for, is small classes, among other things. And we're talking about a class of 10 people, or maybe 8, or maybe 12, but not more than 12, I think, if it's a language class in Russian. And I get feedback from them nonstop, because they speak nonstop, they write nonstop, they read nonstop. It's just, the entire class is feedback. It's all very interactive.
Wonderful. Great. Great. Well, if anyone does have any other questions, any further questions, again, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll make sure we get those answered. But we're gonna wrap up. Professors, do you have any concluding comments you would like to make, or if not?
The important thing is that if you get some questions, feel free to email me. Right? You have my. Like, go to the you go to the Russian department, like Read Russian department, find me. Zhenya is my name. Zhenya@read.edu is one of my emails, and just feel free to email me with practical questions or abstract questions. I'm very happy to chat to you individually. And if you want to make an appointment to talk about program one-on-one, I'll be happy to do that too. We have Zoom nowadays, so it's easy.
Yep, same here. Please feel free to send me an email. I'm also happy to meet over Zoom if you have any more specific questions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon or evening, depending on your time zone. It was a delight.
Thank you for stopping by, guys. It's good to see you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your week.
Stay healthy.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.